Hello, my name's Jane. I'm a counsellor, a Christian counsellor, living and working in Pembrokeshire in West Wales. And I just wanted to share some of my testimony with you today. It's now 14 years ago, to around the age of 47, that I came to faith in Jesus. Or at least I think it was at that point that I came to faith in him. So why do I say that? Because at the age of 11 years old, I remember kneeling at the altar whilst undergoing my confirmation and wondering just how anyone could harm Jesus. I believed in God, but as it turns out, I had no understanding or instruction relating to that belief. In fact, from that point, I never went to church again, save for the odd wedding here and there. Life trundled on, and to all intents and purposes, my adult life had been much like any other. My first marriage was based on doing the best we could for ourselves and our family, but there was also a pursuit of happiness based on having a good time. In fact, it became quite hedonistic, and later a darkness began to enter the relationship. It was something that I didn't understand. I knew that I felt uncomfortable at times, and a gap began to widen between me and my husband. It never occurred to me that he was having affairs. Cracks were appearing, but because we never seemed able to speak to each other on any real level, I began to feel very isolated and alone, and I began to drink a lot more than I should have done. This became my way of coping, and although people would allude to my drinking too much, I didn't really understand what they were saying to me. I guess you could say that I was in a state of denial, and perhaps I also didn't want to face what was happening right in front of my eyes, and I certainly didn't want to face myself. When eventually the whole sordid matter did come out, I began to spiral downwards. I asked my husband to leave for a while, but then quickly realised that I owed it to the family to have another go at retrieving all that was lost. Suffice to say that it didn't work out. We tried, but we could not put things together again, and I wondered whether I had really ever loved my husband. When he left, I didn't miss him, but I was in a very bad way, not sure of myself and completely without anchorage, as if drifting aimlessly on a rough sea. I cannot explain here how devastating this all was, and how I descended into a state of sorrowfulness at my situation and sadness for myself. I also sought answers, and my mind would not switch off, replaying events over and over like a tape recorder, in the belief that if I kept thinking about certain things, I would get the answer I was looking for. In fact, I was so into myself that I became guilty of neglecting my children, and sadly the consequences of that self-sorrow live with me today. It was around this time that I woke in the night with a vision of what appeared to be Satan. He appeared in my sleep, and I woke up with him in my face. This was a completely alien experience for me, as I had not experienced what might be considered to be a night terror before. Time moved on. The house was sold, and I moved into my own cottage with two of our children, one having left for university. I credit myself as being fortunate at this point, since I asked nothing of my husband regarding the home and bills, but he did everything he could to support me. He helped with the mortgage, gave all of the furniture from the family home, and I didn't have to worry financially. With small steps taken each day, I was able to get myself back on some kind of footing, but it was really difficult trying to find some kind of purpose for my life, and I made many mistakes during that time, especially with other men. Our married life had centred around our social life, and therefore my friendships had been tied up in that. I felt terribly betrayed, not only by my husband, but by my so-called friends who didn't visit me. I'd been dropped by everyone. I consoled myself that this was because he had been seeing one of the key women in this group, and because nobody wanted to lose their social centres. He was obviously still in, but I was definitely out. It turns out that this was the best thing actually that could have happened for me, but at the time it was desperately hard finding a new life for myself. I'd been living alone for around 5 years, and just at a point of feeling much better about myself, I began searching. I must have been living in a strange world because I didn't even know what I was searching for at the time, but I felt a pull to look for something. It was towards the end of my time working for an estate agent in Henley that I would take my lunch and sit by the grave of Petula Clark and speak out some of my thoughts. On other days, I would get off to the library and search through the astrology books. It didn't matter what it was, whether it was Indian, Chinese, or stars from the papers. I was looking for something in it and came to realise that it was peace that I was looking for. One day I was drawn to our local church fete and met with a few people that I had become loosely acquainted with over the years. It was here that I was invited to attend an up-and-coming Alpha course. I remember thinking, well, why not? I'm open to anything. However, I did also have a nagging thought about how this might be seen by others, but I decided to go along anyway. Alpha provided an opportunity for me to get out on a night during the week, and I looked forward to it. I identified with much of what was being said, but I was aware of how tired I felt too, and would sometimes fall asleep during the session. When this had finished, the elder asked me whether I would like to come along to prayer meetings too. I agreed to this, but found myself going along on the odd occasion and then spending weeks not being there at all. But each time I returned, I became aware of a certain peace in that place. I then found one Saturday a compulsion to share my story with a counsellor. The following day I wanted to forgive my husband and ask for forgiveness also for my own part in the journey. I set about doing this. The following Tuesday I was due to a meeting at a local club, but the fellowship night was also on this night. I hadn't been for some time, but felt very strongly that I should attend. There was an unusually large gathering of 17 people, whereas there might normally be only around 10. I felt a little lost amongst them all. The evening began by the elder asking whether anybody in the room had seen Satan. I thought how odd this was, but put my hand up to say that I thought that I had, and I was the only one to do so. He then went on to talk about adultery, and I found myself feeling strangely in the spotlight. Later, during a meeting, there was some prayer time. The elder asked if there was anybody in the room who would like to be prayed for, and as he spoke, I felt my heart open as I yearned for it. But I didn't feel I deserved the prayer, and therefore I didn't respond. And just at that moment, a woman spoke up, saying she thought that they should say a prayer for me. I was stunned by this, but grateful for it. Little was I to know where all this would lead.